Good morning, everybody. My name is Ebimbore Seifa. I am the head of research in Conflict Research Network West Africa, and it is truly a privilege and an honor to be part of today's conversation. This conversation is about gender representation in governance as a pathway to economic development and stability in Nigeria. And this is very important. But before I talk a little bit about that aspect, I think it's very important for me to just briefly introduce my organization as well as talk about our collaboration with Stand to End Rape initiative. Conflict Research Network West Africa is a network of researchers, and essentially what we are really focused on is discussions, article publication, and more importantly, the empowerment of our researchers regarding issues of politics, governance, and insecurity in the West African region. One of our programs is the West African Women Peace and Security Network. And what we intend to showcase in that particular program is to focus on these gender-related issues that we would talk about in a short while within the space of security and peacekeeping, as well as politics. And we realize that in order for women to have a voice or a say in that particular space, representation is very important. And more importantly, having access to becoming a decision maker. And that is why I want to congratulate everybody here, especially Stand to End Rape Initiative, who have chosen to become part of this very important journey. We are part of a history. For many centuries, society has tried as much as possible to limit women's roles, or in most cases, to tell women what they can or cannot do within a particular space. For instance, I'm pretty much sure that Dr. Mercy Kwabe of Stand to End Rape Initiative would explore the narrative of the roles that women play in politics, limiting women to campaigners, limiting women to vote mobilizer, but not necessarily allowing women to have that important space there. And I use the word allowing with all sense of responsibility, because it's not a case of being allowed to, it's a case of you being given the opportunity to access this. And I would not want to talk so much because we have very important experts here who would delve into this conversation. These are people who have spent a huge part of their professional life investigating the gender-related issues, but more importantly, advocating for the rights of women and, of course, both men and women in society. So thank you so much for joining us. And at this particular point, I will pass on the conversation to Stand to End Rape Initiative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Dr. Ibim. My name is Hussein Mohammed, and I'm the Programs Officer for Stand to End Rape Initiative. And it's been a great pleasure to be on this platform this morning amongst academics and people that really have gone deep in research about topics like this. And for us at Stand to End Rape Initiative, Stand to End Rape Initiative started as an organization who wants to end everything around sexual violence for women and girls. And we started our project around 2014. And it's been 10 years on this journey, and we've been able to achieve a lot of a mission or projects that we've been able to complete so far. And for us, 2015 passage of the VAP law, passed in 2015 into law. We have been trying of a state act of the VAP law. We were even training in I can remember then we formed in Adamawa to pass to domesticate the law within Adamawa State, and since then we've been to Kebbi, we've been to Plateau State, we've been to Cross River, and next year we're going to next year we're going to Bayelsa. So for our current project around the Special Seat Bill, where we are trying to amplify the women's participation in politics, which is one of the reasons why we decided to work with Con West Africa, because we see that our goals are aligned. Looking at past research that has been coordinated by Con West Africa and most of its members, they align with what we're currently discussing about, which are to do with the amplifying women's participation in politics and also violence against women and girls. So we decided to bring about this topic, this theme for this event this year, and also to support our current project around the Special Seat Bill. one of the things I remember when we wrote this proposal and when we had an interview with the German embassy, who is the founder of this project, why our proposal was selected was because of our level of initiative that we brought into the project in terms of engaging the community, engaging the public in letting them to know about the special seat bill, because bills are always being passed. Many individuals don't know about these bills. And one of the reasons why this bill was even rejected at the Ninth Assembly was because of the gap in knowledge. And we just recently concluded our Cross River Town Hall meeting where we had more than 200 participants, the state actors, the general public, CSOs, media, and so lots of people who came for the event, and we saw the huge gap in knowledge. Many individuals don't even know the bill exists. People that know the bill exists believe that it's just like, oh, you're dashing it out, you're dashing slots for women. And like that, there were so many conversations, and we were just trying to change the narrative. And one of the key things for us was that in Nigeria, looking at the political space at the moment, we can see that it's being male dominated. And we want to change that culture. We want to change that narrative that women also can take leadership position. Women can take decision making position. And for us, we are still key into making sure that we advocate for the passage of this bill. So from this brief introduction, our co-director is also on the call, which is Dr. Mercy Kwabi, who would also be moderating a session, who will also be moderating the panelist session. But I'll briefly and also our panelist speakers as well. But our guest speaker is yet to be online. And I think let me just go ahead with reading the panel. I would start with Dr. Damilola Agbalajobi. Yeah, Dr. Damilola Agbalajobi is a political scientist and a gender specialist. Our research experience began in 2006 at Redeemers University, Nigeria. Dr. Damilola has written articles that have appeared in learned journals and books on women and gender in relation to politics, peace building, power, corruption, governance, climate change, violence, sustainable development, election, and many more. Since 2008, she has won several travel grants to attend and present her papers at international conferences on aspects of politics, developmental. Okay, sorry, I think you lost my beats at some time. Well, of Dr. Damilola. So let me just continue from where I stopped. She has also participated in other workshops and national orientation programs in Nigeria. She's a member of many academies, the Nigerian Political Science Association, Political Studies Association, and Nigerian Young Academic. Dr. Damilola has a PhD in political science from the Department of Political Science, University of Lagos, Nigeria, and she is also a faculty member of the Department of Political Science, Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria. I think at the moment, let's just welcome Dr. Damilola.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for honoring our invitation, Dr. Damilola. So next on my agenda now is also to introduce Mrs. Brenda Anubon. Hello, can you hear me, please?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brenda Anubon. I'm the CEO of Nigerian Women Trust Fund. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to also read your profile very briefly. Okay, as the CEO of Nigerian Women Trust Fund, participation and social development through various programs. Mrs. Brenda brings a remarkable experience to our team, and she has held key positions in various organizations, serving as legal advisors and contributes significantly to research on discriminatory laws related to violence against women in Africa. Mrs. Brenda's leadership experience is evident from her role as a country advisor and consultant for Policy Vault Africa, where she has skillfully facilitated strategic partnership with government agencies, contributing significantly to the digitization of government policies and law. Beyond her profession and accomplishment, Mrs. Brenda actively engaged in speaking engagement and facilitating roles on critical topics such as gender-based violence and women's political participation and human rights. She's also a skilled trainer, equipping individuals, organizations with effective project management and advocacy skill. Academically, Mrs. Brenda holds a master's degree in law and in the rule of law for development from Loyola University, Chicago, a barrister at law from Nigeria Law School. Mrs. Brenda's impact is evident in an unwavering dedication to making a lasting difference in the lives of women and marginalized communities. Thank you once again, Mrs. Brenda. So lastly, I would also like to read the profile of I can say the only male speaker among the speakers for today, and that's Dr. Samuel Oguche. Dr. Samuel Oguche is a senior research fellow at the National Democratic Studies, National Assembly, Abuja, Nigeria. He studied law with second class 2004 after law school, where he achieved the same feat, culminating in his eventual call to Nigerian Bar Association in 2005. After his national youth service, he took up appointment with the University of Jos as a lecturer at the Faculty of Law. He taught several courses. He further obtained a professional development certificate in parliamentary management from the McGill University, Montreal, Canada in 2020. Dr. Oguche left the University of Jos for the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies in 2014, where he has risen to the rank of a senior research fellow in the institute. And currently, he is a visiting associate professor at the law professor of law at the. He's a law teacher, widely published with over 60 research publications in national and institutional scholarly journals and books. Dr. Samuel Oguche has researched and taught and published widely around gender-based violence topics. He was a consultant to IAGA Africa, and he has reviewed the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, that's the VAP Act. Peel reenacts the act due to the obvious flaws and in the legislation. He has facilitated several trainings around the VAP Act, and Dr. Samuel Oguche is one of our consultants at Stand to End Rape initiative on this VAP law, and he has participated in several of our trainings in Plateau State, in Cross River, and hopefully we get him to help us facilitate Biosa's training as well. So once again, I would like to welcome Dr. Samuel Oguche. Please kindly show your presence, sir.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. It's my pleasure being with you today.
So I would like to introduce the moderator for the panelist session, who is Dr. Mercy Kwabe, who is a director at Stand to End Rape Initiative. And I would like her to speak more about herself. Thank you very much, Dr. Mercy.
All right, thank you very much, Mohammed, for that brief introduction. I would like to say thank you to everybody who has created time to be here. We understand that it's the weekend, it's usually the time when people get to rest from the busy week, but we also understand that there's an urgency to the conversations that we are having today. So thank you everybody for being here. We would just kickstart the panelist conversation. And before we do that, I would just give a brief concept on what we're discussing and the issues that have led us to where we are today. I would also like to appreciate Con West Africa for partnering with us on this event. One of the key things I noted from yesterday's event, so in case you're not aware, Con West Africa has been coordinating a 2-day event, which I was a panelist on yesterday and continues on Monday. And yesterday, we had the conversation too around gender equality and women representation in Africa, where we had representative from Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana, and also Nigeria. So 4 countries to compare their narratives. And unfortunately, amongst these 4 countries, Nigeria is not doing significantly well. It was noted that Sierra Leone was doing far better than Nigeria was. But I would like to state that it is also very significant for us to be having this conversation within the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, because this year there's a particular emphasis on the Beijing conference that held in 1995, which led to the declaration. And basically every country which was participant, including Nigeria, right, was stipulated to, you know, come up with means to deal with gender inequality in their countries. And one of it was the purposeful inclusion of women in politics. All over Africa, we've seen different developments. We've seen, you know, some countries that have had to adopt a gender quota. The reason being that if you just leave it to hearsay, rarely anybody would do anything about it. So somebody can come out and say, I support women, but what are you actually doing to support these women? And we've come to the point where we understand that policies do matter. As Stanley Endrip, one of the most common questions we get is, oh, your organization focuses on sexual and gender-based violence. So why are you so interested in politics? Well, I'll answer that question. The reason why we're so interested in politics is because of what happened in 2019. In 2019, 5 gender bills were put at the House of Representatives, and all of those bills did not progress past, I think, first reading. I will allow, when we start to speak about this, I'll allow Dr. Samuel to speak more about this incident. And that was so shameful to see that, but you could understand why that would happen. We did not have, the women were on the minority, and even worse so now. Currently, we have 4 women at the Senate and 16 women at the House of Representatives, all cumulatively about 4% of the entire House of the entire National Assembly. This is very poor compared to other African countries. And for us as Stanley Endrip, there are 3 R's that matter to us. The first R is rights of women. The second is the resources women have, because we are Nigerians and we know that running elections, running political campaigns in this country is very expensive. Yes, some parties will come out to say, we give out forms for free. But giving out form does not necessarily mean that the candidate is going to be on the ballot. That's a whole other politics that is involved. Then the third R is representation. We also believe that female representation is important for gendered policies to be able to be passed. And that now brings us to the Special Seats Bill. In our baseline study that we did on this project, right, we got a lot of comments on, oh, why should we create special seat bill? I mean, you know, there's the 35 affirmation bill, which has not been passed, right? And they say, oh, you know, there's the cost of government, there's this, there's that. But we say every other country that has had to include women in Africa, we've seen the pattern. They've had to go through this. On a panel yesterday, somebody from Sierra Leone told us how they had to pass that bill last year for it to take effect into their politics. But still yet, there are still implementation problems. So I know that my colleague Mohammed spoke about the VAP law and how we've been very, the role that Stanley Endrip has played in domesticating the VAP law across all states, except Kano State, who has still not domesticated this law. However, domesticating a law is not enough. There's still the enforcement part that has to take place. There's still the implementation that has to take place, which is also very critical for us. So in Stanley Endrip, we also understand that you know, civil societies have a responsibility to play. We also understand that there are certain dynamics that women have to always experience in political spaces that we don't get to see across the male perspective of politics. For instance, women are exposed to sexual violence. We have a study that we did in 2022 where we assessed the violence that women face during politics. You have sexual violence, you have deaths, and I'm sure that most of you will be aware of the situation that happened in Kogi State where the PDP women leader was burnt to death. And you have the online harassment, and I think we don't even talk about social media enough, right? The damages that social media does, especially to political campaigns. So you have cases where women are slut-shamed. You have cases where women are body-shamed. And sometimes these women are not even the direct politicians. It might just be their husbands that are the politicians, or it can even be that these women are political activists or supporters of some political parties. Then you also have the unequal standards, you know. One of the things that our baseline study revealed was that a lot of people are saying, oh, if we create special seats for women, what is the assurance that these women will be, you know, educated enough and will be able to politic? But I mean, these are not questions that we ask men, are there? So these are some of the issues that we see. And because next year, the Beijing Declaration marks 30 years. So this year, in the 16 days of activism, we are literally calling out governments to say, okay, what have you done? Because again, political will matters. So as an administration, what have you done to include women? What have you done to make sure that Nigeria, who is supposed to be a beacon in Africa, our nickname is the Giant of Africa. I don't know if that still applies, but as the Giant of Africa, we should not just be giant in terms of population. We should be giant in economics. We should be giant in our political space. We should be giant when it comes to trading. So what are you doing to meet these standards? You have the 5th Sustainable Development Goal, which prioritizes gender equality. And every time we have to talk about gender equality, we always have to remind the audience that we're not saying that men are also not equal. We're saying that if women make up 49.5% of the population based on the projected statistics, then it only makes sense to make women to participate in politics because they are also half of the population. So excluding a group which is not so minority is a little bit mundane, and that's what we're saying. So nobody is saying that women are better than men or men are better than women, which is always the way gender equality conversations go. What we're saying is that women are also equitable to the task as well. So share this space, basically. Share this space with women. And that is why this project is very important to us. And that's why this conversation is very important to us. I would like to thank our panelists for joining us today. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker is unable to join us right now. I hope she can before we end the conversation so that she can give her keynote address. But thank you, Dr. Damilola, thank you, Ms. Brenda, and thank you, Dr. Samuel, for joining this conversation. I would like to know that you can hear me. I can only see myself and Dr. Abi. So if it will not be too much trouble, yes, please put on your camera.
I can hear you.
And start our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just thought to give that background of the conversations that we're going to be having today. And just as a way of starting, I would first direct my question to Dr. Damilola, right? Please, can you, we have about 30 minutes. Mohammed, please confirm. We have about 30 minutes for this conversation. So I'd like to plead with all the panelists to put your responses concise and so that we can move from question to question. As a teacher that I am, I like very interactive sessions. So I would ask that if you have questions that you need to ask the panelists, please just go to the comment section. You can write out your questions. Then when we come to the question and answer session, we would take these questions. So Dr. Damilola, good morning and thank you for joining us today. I would like you to speak on the current state of gender representation in governance at both the federal and state level, and just tell us what your perspective is when compared to other African countries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Yes, looking at the current state of representation in Nigeria presently, we have a very ridiculous percentage of women, which shows that women are not doing well at all. There's a very wide policy gap against women. Because when we look at the National Assembly as at today, as at 2023, we have about 97.25% of men and just about 2.7% for women in the National Assembly. And then if you look at the the level of women representation at the second chamber, even in 2023, we have just about 11 women out of 349 men that we have. That's just about 3.1% for women. Now, of course, this also shows a very low percentage of women in the House of Representatives. And of course, what this means is that the interests of women will not be actually well represented. And as of today, women representation as deputy governors in Nigeria for today, I think we just have about 4 women representing out of how many states? 6, maybe 6, 5 women out of the 36 states we have in Nigeria. And then at the State National House of Assembly also, in 2023, shows that out of 990 seats, women have just about 48 seats. And we have just, out of the 36 states of Nigeria, we have 15 states that have no women at all in representation in the state of assemblies. And then we have states like Abia, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Imo, and some of these states having the largest number of women, 6 out of the 26 seats we have. And we have some states like Kwara, Akwa Ibom, Lagos, and Ondo, so having 4 to 3. So this is kind of represent. When we look at it, comparing what we have to the women representation in national parliament in selected African states, Nigeria seems to be the lowest, because states like Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, they're having like 48 to 45%. Countries like Kenya, Ghana, having like 28 to 15%. So Nigeria is not doing well at all when it comes to women representation in politics. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Damilola, for that brief background. We actually have 6 female deputy governors currently, and it's mostly because their patrons took an extra effort to include them in this process. It's not because their names were on the tickets. And another thing that we see is that, you know, these governors identify as he for she. So in their states, you can actually see small efforts to actually include women. However, these efforts, if they are not concrete in the constitution, or if we do not have a policy, right, you will find that these efforts will go nowhere. So in order to guide our conversation, which is basically on gender representation in governance as a pathway to economic development and stability in Nigeria, I would like to say that the World Bank found in 2021 that sub-Saharan Africa loses $95 billion in resources and in GDP when not including women. And this is a yearly figure. And out of that $95 billion, Nigeria takes about 26% of that $95 billion. So imagine how much as a nation we lose. And this is just a projected amount. This is not even taking into account all the other economic benefits that will come from having female representation. Yesterday at the webinar, we also had to highlight how when it comes to accessing loans in Nigeria, women have different standards when it comes to accessing loans. You have to have a collateral, and most women, when buying properties in Nigeria, because it is easier to put names of properties in their husband's names or in their family members' names who are male, right? They can't access some certain kind of loans, which is a problem as well. So I will direct my next question to Ms. Brenda. Okay, so my next question would be on gender inequality in political participation. How do you think this impacts Nigeria's economic development, especially in terms of policy formulation and implementation? Like I said earlier, I don't know if you heard me, that having this policy is not just enough, right? Implementation also matters. So my question to you is, how does gender equality in political leadership impact Nigeria's economic development?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm not going to put on my video because of the bandwidth. So in terms of the effect on the economic development of the country, if we do not have legislations and policies that support inclusive governance, this country will not only be losing money, which you have just stated World Bank statistic, but this country will not develop at the pace at which it should develop. Let me start by giving an example of the country India, the country that Nigeria replaced on the poverty index as the poverty capital of the world. India was pulled out of that space by the informal sector. The informal sector, which is dominated by women. The reason is this, and it's simple. Women build economies. Women are the backbone of private sector that wants to make money. And just let me give you a simple example, which we all can see. Every commercial bank in Nigeria wants to make money, right? We all get all these little charges on our phones once we send money. That's because they want to make money. How come almost every bank is now having a female CEO? Let me even take you out globally. The European Central Bank is headed by a woman who used to be the head of the IMF. And as she left to head the European Central Bank, another woman took over the IMF, Ms. Georgieva. I mean, you must have seen the picture of her and President Tinubu like a week or two ago. So when we go to beg for money from the Bretton Woods institution, we see an institution that is being headed by a woman, and we sit with them, we ask them for how they will give us money. Haven't we thought of the fact that if we include more women, we could actually have more money in our purse? And it's not because women are magicians. And like I said before, women are economy builders. Just like what happened in India, how the informal economy pulled them out is because they had more women. And, you know, to just give you an illustration, anybody who has seen the Airpeace adverts, you see Airpeace, the man who founded it, talking about his experiences. But as he was ending, he said, "My name is Alan Onyema. We are Airpeace." Excuse me. The optics there showed one man and 6 women surrounded him. Those are his money makers. That's the reason why it is successful. So when it comes to policies that make a country economically stable and economically strong, it makes common sense to have inclusive, inclusive policies, inclusive legislations, because women bring to the table what men cannot bring. So that is why, just like you, it pained me as well when the 5 gender bills were thrown out. It wasn't only just shameful, I mean, I was livid. It was heartbreaking because nobody sees the evidence that is out there about what women are doing and wants the same to happen in their country, yet they don't give women a chance. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma. I think the last statement you made is very profound. Often women are relegated to very social norms of being in the kitchen, you know, raising the family. Nobody actually stops to wonder how important these roles are and the roles that women play, even in politics, right? You will notice that women are always used for campaigns. Even when politicians are in financial troubles and maybe EFCC is coming after them, who do they use to beg the government? It's always women. So in the same light, it's almost like a double entendre, right? In the same light that we are not accepting to view the roles of women in society, it's the same light that they also use to take advantage of the progress women make, or the, will I say, the advantage of having women, right, push agendas that favor them. And this is why it is we are very keen on also understanding the barriers, the key barriers that women face. And I would like to call on Dr. Samuel to speak on this. And my question to you, sir, today would be, what are some of the key barriers? You work very closely with the National House of Assembly. You also work at NILS as well. So we would like you to, from your perspective, what would you say are the key barriers that women face when it comes to participation in governance? And how can we basically overcome this barrier to see that there is greater gender equity and equality in leadership roles?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start by saying that the last speaker touched to some extent the key aspects, the barriers that women face in terms of participation in governance politics generally. Now, one of them, because of time, let me highlight them. I will talk from what I've seen so far within the legislative space, and then the existing facts in literature. And one of the key challenges is the cultural and social barriers, societal barriers. And you will see for sure that if you take example from the gender bills at the 9th Assembly, you discover that cultural barriers, religious barriers actually played out, that in the way that those bills were not passed. And there's this deep-rooted cultural belief or beliefs all over, societal norms that often discourage women from participating in politics. In this way, if you look at Nigerian societies generally, looking at all ethnic groups, leadership is often viewed as a male-dominated sphere, a male-dominated space. So when you see women coming on board to contest for offices, they are viewed with that negative perception. You have gender stereotypes. Women in politics often face stereotypes like, that question their capacity to lead and even handle public offices effectively. So when you see all this playing out, you see that Nigeria has a long way to go. Reference was made earlier to other African countries, and we carry ourselves as the giant of Africa. But we are nowhere when it comes to developmental issues like gender equity and equality. Another problem is political and structural barriers. Political and structural barriers. You see issues like violence, political violence. Nigeria, even the courts have made definite findings of political violence. In the electoral process of 2023, the processes leading to the 2023 general elections, a study was conducted by EGA Africa, and this election manipulation risk index. Areas where elections were likely to be manipulated, one of the key variables, indicators, is electoral violence. And when violence, is identified, when violence characterizes the electoral process, it's already a turn off for women. Because naturally, women are not wired for this type of confrontations. You are going for political campaigns, you are not sure of coming back. You see people armed with dangerous weapons. This is a very negative factor that actually affects women's participation. Again, you see issue of monetization of politics. As was mentioned earlier, it's not enough to say you are giving out nomination forms free. If you are giving it out free, are we going to have a level playing ground? I shared the experience. One of our notable legislators, told me a story. It sounded funny, but it passes a lot of message that during his primary election, he was contesting with a woman, and on the day of the primaries, he just mobilized supporters. Upon sighting the woman, they started shouting, "Ashawo, Ashawo, Ashawo, Ashawo." That was a lot of, it demoralized the woman. It demoralized her, and that was enough exclusion. So when you see all these stereotypes, they go a long way in negatively affecting the participation of our women, even party structures. And you see that most political parties in Nigeria often marginalize our women, placing them in less competitive constituencies or giving them nominal roles within the party structures, women leader and all this. Or how many women are party secretaries, are party chairpersons? So when you are excluded from the internal structure of the political party, then already you are excluded from the general context. If you are not there because there is no independent candidacy, candidates come from political parties, and you are not in a position to influence the decision-making process of political parties. So automatically, women are excluded. So party structures also play a significant role in excluding our women from participation. Then we have legal and policy gaps, weak implementation of our electoral laws, even the implementation of affirmative action. We have the National Gender Policy, which advocates 35% female representation in public office. But do we meet these targets? The answer is no. We just heard the statistics of women who are deputy governors, those who are in the National Assembly, those who are in the State Assembly. So this is actually very poor. And then in the absence of electoral legal framework that will guarantee gender quota, then we'll continue to be singing the same story. And then we also see the issue of women's confidence in themselves. We have seen instances where some women even work against their fellow women. So it is a matter of not being able to even put your house in order. You will see a situation where I don't know when we had a woman contesting for the presidency here, and how many votes? To tell you that even the women who were delegates did not even vote for her. So it is now time for women to start having that belief in their ability to deliver. Women should support their fellow women, and then we'll start seeing examples. So because of that, what do? We have legal and policy options, and we cannot leave it anymore to affirmative action. There is need to take lessons from other African countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, and the rest, even Kenya, that have legal framework that guarantee women representation. That is why the current special seats bill has become so significant. We have learned bitter lessons from the 9th Assembly where the gender bills failed. So those lessons should now be, a kind of driving force towards the campaign for the passage of the special seats bill. Now we have said, okay, there are many men who are willing to support this bill. If you look at those who are even fronting this bill, they are men. So if men have that belief in the capacity of women to deliver, women should have that belief more. And again, those women, the few women we have in governance, should be able to demonstrate capacity, enviable capacity, unprecedented capacity to deliver, so that Nigeria can see this potential in them that, look, we have been missing a lot. Look at the few women we have, look at what they've been able to do, and then we'll be able to clamor for more and get what we are looking for. Then judicial intervention too, people can go to court, and then capacity building and advocacy, especially what we are doing now. The CSOs, I must give it to them, the campaign is ongoing, and we encourage them to do more, join forces in form of coalition, and at the end of the day, the voices of those who advocate for this special legislation will be heard. And then, I see prospects. In conclusion, I will say why our progress has been slow in terms of women representation. We have prospects. With the advocacy, with the determination of women, even men who are supporting them, with those we have in power that are actually delivering, I believe that, sure, we have a very bright light at the end of this tunnel. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. You said a lot in your session, and thank you for all the people that just joined us. You spoke on the cultural and societal barriers which are real. I would also like to say that you also spoke about the systemic and political barriers as well. One of the fruitful things from conversations I've had with people from other regions of the world is that even in very deep-rooted Islamic countries, there has been progress in female participation. For instance, Bangladesh has had 2 female prime ministers. You also look at the UAE, for example, the UAE, the Federal National Council of the UAE, 50% of that Federal National Council are women. And you have also female representation in Saudi Arabia, despite being low, but you see that there's progress. So yes, to concur what you said, there's some progress that we can also see in Nigeria, where we see some female deputy governors, but in the National Assembly, it's nothing to write home about. You also spoke on the, women's confidence confidence in themselves. And that's why a lot of organizations, CSOs, also understand that this is a role that we have to play actively, which has led to a lot of CSOs educating women and sensitizing them. A couple of months ago, I was in Cross River State, and the Commissioner of Women Affairs had gathered women who were seeking for political positions at the local level, at the local government, and there were so many institutions there to educate them. You have FIRS was there to be able to teach them about their tax and filing their tax documents, and basically different organizations teaching them on how to present themselves. So yes, we do understand that mentorship too as well is also an important part of female representation. The conversation of always, oh, women don't support women, when it comes up, I always tell people that, but it's because men too don't support women, and most women rely on men for political education. And that's why you find that a lot of women, when you ask them, like the example you gave, you just, put a group of people to just shout, hey, prostitutes, or a shout to a female politician. What you've done there is that other women that also want to run for political seats, that see that similar example, would not want to run for this seat. I had a very good conversation with one of the current sitting House of Rep members, where she shared, because her state is a Sharia state, and she shared an experience with me where when she wanted to run for House of Reps, the men in the state stood up, came to her home first to talk to her husband to say, she cannot run for seat. We cannot be led by a woman. This is not appropriate in our politics and our religion. And this was also taken to a very top sheikh in the country. And unfortunately for them, when the sheikh gave his response, the sheikh had to use the prophet to say that, oh, there were times when the prophet sent women to represent him. So it is not out of our religious belief to say that women cannot represent a community. And that's how they were able to dissolve that case. So we also understand, I'm saying all of this to lay the foundation that Dr. Sam was trying to make, which is that it is a multifaceted approach that we have to deal with. CSOs alone cannot make that change. Politicians alone, even when the policies have passed, cannot implement this change. We also have to demand accountability, which brings me to my next question that I will be asking Dr. Damilola. So Dr. Damilola, we've talked about, the barriers that women have faced. We've talked about the foundational problems that come with women inclusion in politics in Nigeria. I don't know if you have any key examples that you can share of either countries or regions where gender inclusive governance has led to, economic progress.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, there are many countries in the world that have done a lot of things to ensure gender inclusive governance. And starting from Dr. Samuel talked about, Rwanda is a key example of one of such countries that have done a lot to ensure gender inclusive governance. And it has actually done a lot. And you can see that we have a very strong focus on homegrown policies and initiatives. And this has actually contributed to significant improvement in access to service and human development indicators. It has actually declined poverty from about 77% in 2001. And the life expectancy at birth has improved from 29 in the mid-1990s to 69 in 2019. And so this is a function of the fact that Rwanda post-genocide reconstruction effort actually went a long way to prioritize gender equality and women's empowerment. And the government implemented policies and programs to promote women's participation in governance, in education, and in the economy. And so this is why, and one of the things they did was quota. Rwanda introduced quota to ensure women representation in parliament and local government. And this, they've gone a long way. Ethiopia is another country to talk about. Ethiopia saw the largest increase in women political representation in the executive branch from 10% of female representation, female ministers in 2017 to 47.6% in 2019. And one of the things they did, they actually did some temporary specific measures to ensure that women representation was increased. And because of what they did, Ethiopia saw increase in reduction in poverty to a large extent. No surprise that the economy of Ethiopia experienced strong, broad-based growth, averaging 9.4% a year from 2010-11 to 2019 to 2020. This is because of the fact that they ensured women representation. Another country is Senegal, about 63.4%. And what Senegal did is they saw more of its girls acquiring education. They trained more of their women from primary school, and the percentage of women going to school actually increased. And because of what they did, the economy of Senegal actually also increased because of the fact that they ensured that more women were allowed to enjoy governance, education, and the stuff. And so Morocco is another country that I could mention because they mandated about 30% minimum quota of seats in the national and regional legislature. Women still struggle against cultural pressure that inhibit their success. But as of 2019, about 18.4% of the seats in the Morocco parliament were held by females. And so the country had made great stride in law reforms because of the temporary specific measures they introduced to ensure they strengthen women representation. And so this actually strengthened women's property rights by equalizing husbands and wife ownership rights over property acquired during marriage. So Morocco also has the strongest, highest nominal GDP in Africa because of ensuring the equity when it comes to women representation in governance. And of course, we have South Africa that actually, the political parties in South Africa has actually introduced quotas since 1994, especially the major party, ACN. And of course, what did this was, it resulted in about 27% of women in their very first democratic election. And about in 2021, as of 2021, we have about 46.5% of women in their lower chamber. And that makes the country the highest female representation in parliament worldwide. And so because of that, of course, we know that their GDP, nominal GDP had increased. And of course, South Africa currently has the second highest nominal GDP in Africa, all because they've increased women representation in governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Damilola. Statistics and data is always important. And as you were calling these numbers, I was just thinking and saying, God, I think the highest Nigeria has ever gotten to is 13% of female representation. That's the highest we've ever gotten to. And having to see many other countries, some of these countries that you mentioned 10 years ago were not even stable politically. Some of these countries, and that was my experience yesterday talking to somebody from Sierra Leone, to know that Sierra Leone has taken this measures and Nigeria hasn't even taken these measures as well. And that will bring me to Ms. Brenda, because I think for you from Nigeria Women Trust Fund, you'll be able to speak more on, the contributions of women, because when we talk about economics, right, there's a key thing also tied to economic development, which is national security. We cannot talk about economics and not talk about national security. Nobody wants to invest in a country that is, security, that the security is troubled or there's a lot of insecurity problems. So my question to you would be that, how do you think female representation or gender representation of women will contribute to social stability and national cohesion, especially when it comes to regional security and ethnic diversity? You can speak in the context of the region, West Africa, or you can speak in the context of Nigeria. So how will female representation lead to social stability and national cohesion that would inform regional security and ethnic diversity? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just as you were saying that, one of the speeches a friend of mine in the UN Women made just came to my mind. And he said, engaging more women, inclusive governance is smart economics. And it still boils down to what we talked about when I spoke earlier about women being economy builders, women creating success wherever they go to. And that is why most banks are having women MDs. Now, in terms of the contribution of women, just yesterday I read about, this is a 2024 report by European Central Bank, conducted by the European Central Bank, shows that for every manager that is a man that is replaced by a female, they found out that it reduces 0.5% of carbon dioxide emission. Can you beat that? Which means having more women as leaders helps the environment. Now, when I read that, it didn't make sense to me. So I decided to read more and understand what it meant for women to cause a reduction in carbon dioxide. After all, we breathe the same air like men. And it showed that the lifestyle of men is actually what the problem is. And they gave statistics. In like 10 smokers, perhaps 3 would be women. And then you know that wherever someone is smoking, if you go around there, if you're not a non-smoker, you become an indirect smoker, you can choke or whatever, and that affects the environment. In terms of disposing paper, women are more likely to shred paper and dispose properly. Men are more likely to squeeze and then throw, because they like to aim at, the waste paper basket throw. Sometimes they don't get into the basket, it goes to the floor, and all that. So there were several, criteria that they wrote out that actually goes to support the fact that having women in leadership position reduces carbon dioxide emission, which means it's good for the environment. So also while you were talking, somebody just put a statement in the comment section, which was simply echoing my mind. This talk about women don't help women, it's just, I think it's a rhetoric for maybe developed by whomever to indirectly control women. That's it. Otherwise, there's simply nothing, there's no empirical facts to prove that. If a woman gets up and votes for a man, it doesn't mean that she doesn't support women. Perhaps that's her candidate, and everybody is free to have their choice when it comes to elections. So in terms of women contribution, I don't have to remind all of us that we have somebody who is the WTO, who was just re-elected for another 4 years. And she, of course, happens to be the first African woman there, first woman actually. And I'm just putting Africa because, we are involved out there. If we didn't have what it takes to lead, people will not be recognizing African women. She's not the only African woman who is, leading a group of people. If you go to the World Bank today, you find a lot of Africans who are, managers, who are leading, cross-cutting solution areas. And that's because we have what it takes. So the fact that people keep saying, whenever you talk about women, they will tell you, oh, where is the capacity? That rhetoric also, we should also throw away. We have the capacity, we have the knowledge, we have what it takes. We have done it before. There are prime ministers of other countries who were women, and during the COVID era, they were best performers in terms of containing the spread of the pandemic, you see? So women have that natural ability to get things done. They say when you want to run a business, get a man to start it. But if you want it to be successful, get a woman to make it successful. That's what we stand for. We make things successful. We grow things. We have that natural ability to expand. My friend called it the expansionist agenda. A woman is the person who gives birth and populates the world. So we have that divine, it comes from nature. We have that divine power to multiply. And that's why anything we touch is successful. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that response. And I want to say thank you to, I think it's Augusta in the comment section who made that statement. Yes, I always get very thrown off when we have the notion that women don't support women, right? And you made a very key thing there, a very key comment there. And I would ask everybody to just read what she had written in the comment section. So thank you, Ms. Brenda. The inclusion of women in politics cannot be underestimated. The inclusion of women, even in social spaces, cannot be underestimated. Recently, I was on a study tour to Germany, when we got there, we also discovered that they also don't have a particular gender quota, but there's something that has been reiterated on this conversation that I need to tell you also what Germany has done. So for every registered company right, in Germany, that functions, that has like a CAC registration, like what you have in Nigeria here, it is mandated that the board must have 30% representation of women. And if your board doesn't have 30% representation of women, you would not be allowed, your license will not be renewed. You won't get any contracts and your license will not be renewed. This is what is stipulated. And I'm setting this space because of my next question that I will throw to Dr. Sam. So we know that in some cases, when you don't have these policies, it becomes very, very difficult to be able to push for female representation. And we also try to ask, how was Germany able to institute this? Although they don't have a national policy that says they reserve seats for women, but they also have party regulations. So at the party level, you have parties like the Green Party that have stipulated that women must be 50-50. And how they sit in the assembly, they sit based on party. So you find a female and a male representative in like female, male, female, male, meaning that there is no space where two genders get to sit together in the House of Assembly. And this is something that brings us to our next point. Dr. Sam, you've been able to talk about the role and that culture and tradition plays. And now I would like to spotlight more into the Beijing Declaration of almost 30 years ago. And this brings us to the current policies that, are at the National Assembly. And just wanting to know your opinion on these legislative measures. Do you think that adopting these legislative measures will have an impact in Nigeria? And if it has an impact, how can it be effectively implemented to achieve tangible results in the future? Because we know that the special seat bill is a temporary measure. So how do we make sure that it is implemented at the federal state level to achieve tangible results that would be able to show in terms of statistics the influence of women in political spaces? Okay, I think I can direct this question to Dr. Damilola. Dr. Damilola, just to reiterate, the question was on the current policies that we currently have, the special seat bill, and also the 35 affirmation bill that is being handled by the Senate. How do you think this bill would, or these legislative measures would be adopted, and what can we say would be an effective implementation style to be able to achieve tangible results on female representation, or to be able to give enough statistics to show that female representation is indeed necessary in the Nigerian political space?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the things that can be done is to ensure that quotas for women in political parties, legislative bodies, and executive positions are implemented. There's a lot of things that have been said, but little is being done. And one of the things that can be done, look at the example of South Africa, for example. They had long ago ensured that ACN, for example, had mandated for 50% women representation in their political parties. And I think it's important to start from our political parties. If political parties are not putting women forward, how do we want to ensure that women are going to be part of the people who are going to be elected in the first place? So electoral reforms can actually play a crucial role in promoting women's participation in politics. And so what the Independent Electoral Commission can do is to introduce policies that will encourage political parties to field more female candidates. If we don't field the female candidates, how do you want, there's no woman to even vote for, there's no woman contesting for such positions, how do we want to have women representation? It's not possible. Fine, you said that there are those temporary special measures that have been introduced over the years, but are those temporary measures there? Are they actually implemented? Because starting from ensuring that political parties put women forward is very, very important. And of course, legislative candidate quotas is very, very important, because what they can do is it helps us to provide constitutional, constitutions or electoral party laws that require a minimum number of candidates are women. It's not just saying it, we must ensure that when they are there, so that this type of quota is usually a binding form of candidate quota for all parties that are intent to contest for parliamentary seats. It's starting from there. It's just a temporary measure that will ensure that when we get to that level, so legislative candidate quota gives the state the opportunity to enforce sanctions to compel political parties to abide by the adopted standard. If they don't enforce, then they will not have implementation. And then voluntary candidate or party quotas. In many countries, gender quotas were first introduced by individual political parties and were later adopted by the parliament. And this is a form of a way to ensure that quotas are implemented. So voluntary party quotas have been increasingly popular among left and central-left parties in many countries of the world. Why can't we do that? You mentioned that the Green Socialist and Social Democratic parties in many countries of Europe have done that. So these are some of the measures that can be adopted. And of course, reserve seat quotas, not just putting this as policies. Implementations are very, very important. Reserve seats are the least used quota types globally, but they are increasingly used in African countries. And you can see some of the examples we mentioned in Southeast Asia also. And so to date, we have 36 countries and territories have adopted a system of reserve seats using some methods. We have some rotational quotas, alternative thresholds. All these things are there to ensure that these things are implemented. When they are there, what the system does is to ensure that the implementation, and when there are no implementations, sanctions are put in place. And when we don't, so in Nigeria, it's unfortunate that some of the policies we even have, nobody is monitoring to ensure enforcement. If we don't ensure enforcement, how will political parties? Some political parties don't even field any woman at all in some positions. So how do we want to have women representation? So implementation is very key, and not just implementation, sanctions. When we ensure that we put sanctions in place, that when any party is not implementing, there's a sanction in place, then it will go a long way to curb some of these challenges we have mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Damilola. I'm still trying to get Dr. Sam back on this call because I would like him to speak more on the implementation, since he works very closely with the National Assembly and NILS. Like, what are the plans to hold these parties accountable? What are the plans to make state governments also accountable as well, right? Just having this law, and I think this is a general Nigerian problem. I always tell people that Nigeria doesn't have a problem of laws. We have, in short, we have so many conflicting laws. The problem we have is implementation. Nobody is monitoring, like you said. There are no sanctions, so there's so much impunity. For example, there's a law on social media and fake news and having to spread misinformation about candidates. But year in, year out, every time there's an electoral cycle, we see a lot of fake news, we see a lot of misinformation. Nobody goes to jail for this. Nobody pays the price for this actions, right? And pending when Dr. Sam comes back, I will move on to Ms. Brenda with my next question. Because again, we talk about the role of private sectors, we talk about the roles of civil society organizations and international partners and all the stakeholders that are involved in ensuring that governments are held accountable to including women into political spaces. So my question to you today, Ma, would be, how do we make sure that, or how do we ensure that private sector, civil society organizations, and international partners support gender inclusive governance structures in Nigeria to drive economic development and stability?
So we at the Women Trust Fund, we do a whole lot of engagement with the civil society and of course members of the National Assembly, of course, that's the government. But in terms of bringing even the private sector in, it is the responsibility of everyone to become an advocate of inclusion. And there's several angles that we could go. We could go from either development to childcare or to security. I read a report that is being put together by the Women, Business and the Law of the World Bank. And in terms of childcare in West Africa, Nigeria scores very low, behind Liberia, behind Sierra Leone, behind Ghana. And that is because there are more child beggars on the street in Nigeria than these countries that I've mentioned. So when we bring up issues of children being out of school, it is everybody's business. It's not just for civil society. So that is why everyone has to, lend a voice, engage the media, because the media is a platform that we can use to reach everybody. So we use the media to advocate for inclusion, because there is no woman that is empowered today that will let the child run around the streets carrying a plate and begging for food or whatever. You saw the number of children that were arrested during the End Bad Governance protest. We saw them on TV. A whole lot of them were looking, malnourished, and they had been incarcerated for a long time, and their parents didn't even know where they were. No empowered woman would allow her child to be missing for so long without going to look for her. So let's make this a social issue. Everyone, all our hands on deck. We use the media, social media, of course, to target the younger population, the traditional media to target every other person, and then make the case out, make it loud. We need more women on the table to make decisions. We need more women in government to be able to bring the female perspective, the female heart to it. We need more women in business, because once a woman is empowered, a community is empowered. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mara, for that response. Very concise, very straight to the point, very inclusive of the media. And earlier I had said that I think we don't pay so much emphasis of the role of the media. And that's why even us at Stand to End Rape, one of the things we've decided to do on this project, I know that Ms. Brenda is very familiar with our project, but just for every other person's benefit, one of the things we've tried to do on this project of amplifying women's political participation, especially towards the 2027 elections, is that we've also decided to bring in the media and re-emphasize their position and their role in amplifying women's voices. So the media is also responsible for not spreading fake information about women. So in this, our call to action, we also put a lot of emphasis on the media, making sure that they fact-checked everything that goes on or every information that goes through them, because again, the public, especially social media, a lot of the public relies on information from social media. So the moment that there's a false information, there should be a reaction from a credible, media source to say, what you're saying is wrong. This is actually the accurate data. And yes, there are a lot of fronts that Nigeria is not scoring very well when it comes to women representation, when it comes to, the protection of children. And I believe that it is a collective responsibility. So for everybody on this call, whatever sector you belong to, private, government, we all have an equal responsibility to educate people and to make sure that in our little spheres, we are challenging the gender norms, right? And gender status of women, and pushing for the equal representation of women in politics. This brings us to the end of our session, where I would be asking my final question to the panelists. My final question would be, what role, if you were to sit down and advise the Nigerian government, if you were given the opportunity, because we're hoping that since this recording would be put online, we're hoping that at least our leaders will get to see our discussion and listen to us. So given a platform to advise the Nigerian government, what would you say they can do to ensure that women have a secured role in politics, to ensure necessary support for women, knowing the economic barriers, the social barriers, and the cultural barriers, to ensure training and resources that would lead to economic policies and development outcomes in Nigeria? If you're given that opportunity, how would you advise the Nigerian government? I will start with Dr. Damilola and move to Ms. Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think one of the challenges we have in Nigeria is we lack institutional support. And it's institutions are beyond individuals. So it's important for the government to establish institutions that will ensure dedicated. We have ministries of women affairs, but that's what we're talking about. Ensure that dedicated to ensuring the empowerment of women those gender focal points must do their job. It's not just there for them to have them in names, but it's important for us to establish them as women caucus department to ensure that, for example, in the National Assembly, they must have established women caucus so that they will provide a platform for women lawmakers to advocate for women interests is very, very important. And of course, training and capacity building. Many of these countries, even in the United States, they have some of these institutions, private institutions are already doing that. For example, we have the e-health. Government can work in collaboration with some of these private institutions, private NGOs, civil society organizations, to train, to develop the capacity of women, because somebody who has capacity that can go a long way, provide mentoring programs, technical assistance, so that women in governance can enhance their roles as policymakers and their analytical skills is very, very important. And then resource and funding, you talked about that. Dedicated funding, many countries of the world have that. Dedicated fundings and resources. Provide grants and scholarships for women who want to be lawmakers, for example. Some of these civil society organizations are already doing that, training for women who want to be lawmakers and provide access to information. And of course, men ride on their networks and collaboration. Government can also ensure that women networks helps, because without networks and collaboration, women cannot go a long way. So women's network can be established, and they must do that in collaboration with private institutions and then provide international partnership. Government cannot do it alone. Just as Bernard said, it's important for everybody to work. So government must work with private individuals, civil society organizations, and every other person, so that they can provide mentoring and evaluation also. Because when you don't ensure that, so that whatever policies the government puts in place to ensure that maybe political parties implement them, they must monitor and evaluate how many percentage of women did APC or PDP or Labour Party field. They must monitor at every level from the primaries, so that we can ensure that women's voice are heard, and then all the policies that are put in place are actually implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that response, for reiterating that, all stakeholders have to work in tandem. There needs to be dedicated resources for this, and there needs to be a network for collaboration that women can also access, because this is what the male counterparts have. Thank you very much. Ms. Brenda, over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, so we can start by bringing back the 5 gender bills that were thrown out. I'm aware that one of the female legislators that we have has resurrected the GEO bill and has given the bill to her colleagues to look through and take out all the things that are scary to the men, because they said that equality was what was scaring them. So they can simply just change it to the E there, from equality to equity, and then let's proceed. Because looking around Africa, the countries that have more women in governance all made it deliberate. They use their legislation. So let's use legislation and get more women into office, and we will definitely see a big change in the country, be it in the family, be it in our economy, and every other sector that we want to look at. So let them bring back the 5 gender bills, and we will start from there. Then secondly, on the part of the citizens, if the government is bringing back the gender bills, we should also find a way to have one voice, because I see that even us, as the citizens or the followers, as we have leaders, the followers, we seem not to be demanding enough, because that's one of the things that one of the feedback that we got from externals who came to meet with us about certain issues that the Women Trust Fund, that it seems as if the population is happy with what we see on ground. If we are not, why are we not speaking up? So I'm not saying that we should take to the streets, because we saw what happened to the NSAS protesters and the bad governance protesters, but we can use our power as citizens peacefully to support the fact that we need more women in governance. we need to do that. And then in our small spaces, in the private sector, they're already doing well. I mentioned a few. The banks, the airlines, they're getting more women. We're having more women pilots. So the private sector is doing their own part. And then we have the government bringing back the 5 gender bills, which we expect that they will be passed into law. Then the citizens also lending a hand by talking and supporting that. You'll see that in the next 5 years, we should be looking at not just equity or equality, we should be looking at what more can we establish that will now accommodate all of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Brenda. You said something that was very keen, which was on, having a voice as a citizen, and you made reference to the NSAS protests that warranted a lot of aggression afterwards. One of the things that our findings also produced from the baseline study was that we were able to deduce that Nigeria doesn't respond well to aggressive advocacy. No matter, even if you are not being aggressive, right? If you have a certain tone, because this was something that we also found out, and a lot of lawmakers also admitted this to stand to NDRIP to say, oh, we didn't like the tone of the person that presented the bill, or we didn't just like how she approached us, right? And that was I'm referring to the bills that were presented in the 9th Assembly. So thank you very much for that input. There's a comment in the section from Ms. Augusta, where she states that we should also encourage more women to become card-carrying members of political parties so that they can rise through the ranks. Unfortunately, I have a personal experience, which Dr. Abi knows about, of trying to join a political party when I was fresh out of school. And in trying to join this political party, they basically asked me, how old are you? And I said 23. And they looked at me head to, and they just started laughing. And they told me, go and come back in another 10 years. And as a young Nigerian who wanted to, be part of the political system and join a political party, this was very discouraging. Since then, I have never tried to join a political party. Oh, I can see that Dr. Sam is back. Dr. Sam, welcome back. Unfortunately, we're done with the session, but I still have one question that I would like you to address, and then just give your concluding thoughts on, so that we can move on to the question and answer session. I can see Dr. Abi's hand up. Do you want to speak before I go to Dr. Sam?
I will wait for Dr. Sam then.
All right. Dr. Sam, oh, you can't speak. Okay. I think the question we had for you, if you're okay with typing it, I can see you have a comment. If we must make a progress as a nation, we have to improve women's representation in governance. This calls for vigorous campaigns by stakeholders towards the passage of the special seat bill. I agree with you on that. We should continue to sensitize political, religious, and community leaders. I also agree with that, because we have to take a multifaceted approach to dealing with the special seat bill. And Dr. Sam, we would also be grateful if you can tell us in the comment section what the implementation strategy of the government would be to implement the special seat bill when it has been passed. That was the only question that had that was left pending. So thank you to all our panelists, Dr. Damilola, Dr. Sam, Ms. Brenda, for your enriching insights on this particular topic. I would open the floor up to questions from our participants. If you have any questions, you can either write it or you can just raise your hand and I will call you to ask your question. I can see Professor Said's hand is up. Welcome, Professor Said, but I'll go to Dr. Abi first and then circle back to Professor Said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. Initially, I'd introduced myself, but we have some new people. Yes, I'll just do that quickly. So my name is Ebimbori Seifa. Abi is the short form, and I'm the head of research for Conflict Research Network West Africa. And I must admit that I am so happy with today's session, because we do have a program in our organization, West African Women Peace and Security Program. And I'm really happy that we're able to collaborate with Stand to End Rape. And they have been very, very, very helpful and supportive in our drive to advocate for the rights of women. So to my will I say question or suggest or contribution? Is it both of them? First of all, I want to thank the panelists and also the moderator. I have learned a lot. I have never really seen myself as an expert in gender studies or gender issues in Nigeria. So it's really an eye-opener. Dr. Damilola, thank you so much for the statistics. Very scary statistics, but very, very important, and lends crucial urgency and validation to our conversation today. So Dr. Mesa has already talked about her card-carrying experience, and I was smiling because I noted it down for my comment. So my comment has to do with intersectionality. This is very important to me because we've talked about women from a general perspective, and women are quite heterogeneous. So you have those who are educated, those who are not educated, those who are rich or married to influential men. So where is the space for intersectionality? Because look at Dr. Mercy Kwabe, fresh out of university, 23 years old with a BSc degree in political science, wanting to change Nigeria, and then going through the most obvious route to it, going there. And I'm pretty much sure, and I stand corrected, that if a 40-year-old woman had come in, a 40-year-old married woman had come in to apply to be a card-carrying member, and then Mercy was also there as well, they most likely would have given it to that woman, or at least considered her application. So this is where I'm asking the question of intersectionality. Where does it, where is, how does it reflect within this space of women's representation, especially in politics and also economic environments? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's for us as women, and of course the government, to ensure that age is not, as long as you are 18 and above. And that's where the role of many of the civil society organizations come in place. Societies like eHealth, Electa Africa, and Nigerian Women Trust Fund, some of these organizations are already doing a lot to ensure that as long as you are 18, you should be like what Augusta already mentioned, that women should be encouraged to be card-carrying members of political parties. Unfortunately, women are left to be just women leaders whose voices are not even heard. That is not, should not be the place. So, irregardless of, because in Nigeria, the minimum, the list is the qualification for you to be anything is just what. And so, irregardless of your education, your status, your class, no woman should be disallowed to be a part of a political party or to contest, as long as you have the qualification that it requires. But I think one of the things that women should know, that women are held more, I don't know why, but it's obvious that in Nigeria, that if a man is contesting with a school certificate, a woman then is expected to have a PhD. Women seems to be held from kind of a higher pedestal than men. But the truth of the matter is that whatever, either your, and that's why women should work together as one formidable voice, to work together using their networks. I remember that I said that men use a lot of their networks. How many of them have a PhD? How many of them even have degrees? Yet they get to these positions. So it's important for women to work together and ensure that they carry everybody along, as long as you have what it takes. And that's where training, politics requires a lot of skills. So it's important, I think it's important for women to work together and train themselves, so that once you have the skills, politics has its own skills, its own strategy. You need to know how to work with the media. You need to have the skill it takes. And I think that's where women have found one thing. Don't just carry you want to go and contest for a position. You don't even have any relationship with any party. You don't have what it takes. You are not from the grassroots. And that's why we fail. We must learn to play the politics as it is. It has its own skills, has its own particular strategy. And so I think when women work with those skills and strategy, they will go a long way. So either you are rich, either you're a PhD holder, either you're poor, whatever position you have, with your network, with your mentoring, right mentoring provisions, with the right training, then everybody will be able to work together and get to social. And that's why the issue of it, yes, it's important. Either you are black or you're white or you're yellow, whatever it is, whatever class you form, when you come together as a whole, then you can get to the position you want to get. I think that's where we have found one thing, because women don't get to learn the tricks of this game and then work together as a formidable one. It's very, very important to do this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Damilola. Just to add to what you said, we also have to understand that there's also a systematic restriction of women into the space as well, right? And that would also inform how women are included in conversations or women are included in political decisions. And for me, one of the outputs of having to experience that, at this point, I was also a master's holder, by the way. So I had not just finished the undergraduate, I was a master's holder. And I had just come from a country where I had seen a 19-year-old become a member of parliament. So I thought, okay, do you know what? If a 19-year-old can do it in their country, I can do it in my country. And I came back and had to experience that. And this also fueled my interest in the Not Too Young to Run campaign, which was later passed by President Buhari. And it was not even a campaign that was needed because constitutionally, we have the right to run and also vote and participate in politics by the time you turn 18. So thank you for that background. I can also see Professor Saheed's hand up, so I'll allow Professor Saheed speak now. Please, let's just manage our time because we have about 8 minutes to get through this session. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you people for putting this together. My name is Saeed Owonikoko. I'm talking from Yola. I just want to concur that, yes, in getting women to participate more in politics, I think that we need to emphasize the importance of, being, members of political parties. And I think this is very important for us. We don't have to, if we look at the statistics of women participation in politics, being as card-carrying members of political party, it is very poor. And if it is very poor, we don't expect that at the top, when it comes to participation, there will be, that will increase. Let me give you some data, for example. In the Northeast, in the last election, for governorship election, in Adamawa, only one woman participated out of 15 governorship candidates. That is quite poor. Meanwhile, in states like Bauchi, Gombe, and Taraba and Yobe, no woman at all participated in governorship election. The same thing when you look at the House of Assembly, House of Rep candidacy and House of Senate is very poor. In fact, in some, for example, let me read in Bauchi, where you have 32 candidates that contested for House of Senate, not even a person, one person is a woman. The same thing in Taraba, the same thing in Gombe. So the space for women in terms of party politics is shrinking. So let's beam our eyes there. Let's make sure that we encourage. I know that the experience of Dr. Kwabe, about this is very unpalatable, but I think that when women consistently show interest to participate in this, the space will open up for women. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Professor Said, for this comment. You're absolutely right. And I think most of us can concur and agree with you on this, that we need to constantly put more emphasis on women joining political parties. And like Dr. Damilola said, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a gap in the information women have when it comes to politics. And that's why mentorship is also needed. We've run a lot of studies to see that some countries that have gotten to the point where you have almost equal women and female representation or women representation in politics, what they've had to do is that they've had to create mentorship programs. When they created, in some countries, they had very bad experiences because when they created the mentorship programs where male politicians were meant to mentor female politicians or aspirants, then there were cases of SGBV, sexual and gender-based violence, within them. So in some countries, they now decided, okay, do you know what? Let a woman be the mentor of other women that want to come into this political space. But in the case where in the whole National Assembly, we have 20 women, right, out of 469 seats, if I'm not mistaken, just 20 women. How will these 20 women mentor all the plenty people that want to come into politics? So again, the barriers lead to more barriers and more barriers. And in trying to reduce the barriers, starting from the political party is a good standpoint. I also believe that a lot of work has to be done in mandating that political parties have internal policies that also support the representation of women in these spaces. Thank you so much for that contribution. I don't know if we have any other contribution or question that we have to go through. Okay, so in the absence of none, I want to say thank you again to all our panelists. This has been a very rich session. Just as a way of summarizing, today we've been speaking on gender-based violence and female representation in governance, and our focal point has been on the pathway to gender equality that will lead to economic development and stability in Nigeria. As Nigerians, I know that it can be a bit hard to build up your hope in the system. There are a lot of things. Every day you wake up in this country, there's something happening that can basically discourage you from even wanting to try to, change things in the country. But we must stay ever vigilant and ever persistent in trying to get results. We had presentations and we had 3 panelists today on board. We had Dr. Damilola, we had Ms. Brenda, and we had Dr. Sam, who had to drop off due to network problems. Today, our conversation has guided us through the ridiculous percentage of female representation in Nigeria. We've also talked about the interest of women and the violence that women face in political spaces, and not just women who are running for political offices. This violence also extends to women who are relatives of political aspirants. This violence also extends to political analysts and journalists who are women as well. Our conversation was also able to point to how Nigeria needs to support more inclusive governance. Nigeria having replaced India as the poverty capital is because India has a forum in India which was led by women, and now more involved in the day-to-day activities of politics in their country. You can also see that women make waves in the international system, right? The EU Central Bank governor is a woman. We also have our dear Okonjo-Iweala, who is representing the nation very well. We also have Aisha Mohammed at the UN, right? So it looks like women in Africa do better, or the women from Nigeria do better internationally than we do nationally, which is not a good thing at all. Compared to other African countries, Nigeria is doing significantly worse. And Dr. Sam basically shone some light on why this is happening. We have a lot of cultural, societal barriers. We also have systematic and political barriers as well. You also find that in some examples, you see some democratic countries in Africa that have had to institute these policies, and the evidence of these policies in their economic development. It was also pointed out, and I really love this aspect from Dr. Dami, where she gave us statistics of how different countries are doing. You can see that Rwanda, Ethiopia, Senegal, Morocco, and South Africa have done significantly well because of their female representation, which is almost at 50%, and in some cases more than 50%. Ms. Brenda also pointed out that we need to engage more women in inclusive governance, because this is what will bring about smart economics. Women are not just, should not just be relegated to campaigning for people and, wearing the campaign wrappers and dancing in publics. No, women can now be included in political spaces, which will benefit the country at large. Speaking on implementation of these policies, Dr. Damilola also emphasized the need for binding quotas, not just from the national aspect, even from the state aspect, even from the party aspect, because parties have a role to play. So yes, in order to make sure that government actually keeps to the affirmative action and the special seat bill. Dr. Damilola pointed to the fact that institutions like Ministry of Women Affairs, right, has to do their part and carry along other organizations, establish women networks. But one fact we know about the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs is that they are very underfunded. Ms. Brenda also talked about how, we can build a lot of coordination, and some of these coordinations actually exist. At the National Assembly, there are committees that are led by women to foster more women representation. There's one at the Senate and there's one at the lower house of Assembly. To wrap up our conversation, our advice to the Nigerian government that was stipulated by our panelists today was on establishing networks and collaboration, monitoring and evaluating, because we need a lot of data to be able to understand the intricacies of this problem. In as much as Dr. Damilola was able to give us some of the implications around monitoring and evaluation. One of the problems we significantly have in Africa and in Nigeria is a collective data. So most times you hear that data is distorted. Somebody can say 5% here, another person saying 7%. So we need more aggregated data when trying to address this issue. Then also the problem of dedicated funding. Politics in Nigeria is very expensive, and there needs to be dedicated funding to help women. Simply giving forms is not enough. And to wrap up this conversation, Ms. Brenda talked about bringing back the 5 gender bills, that we need to start from the policy angle. Let us have these policies on paper first, then we can now move to talking about implementation. Thank you very much for your contributions to this panel. It has been an honor to moderate this panel discussing on a topic that is very close to my heart and the heart of my organization. I am particularly thankful to the panelists and also to the participants who have listened to our conversation. I would also like to appreciate ConWest Africa for this partnership, and I look forward to working with your team more in the future. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much, Dr. Besekwabi, and thank you, everyone. So for me, this has been like a learning session for me because I'm currently on field, and concerning our project around amplifying women participation in politics. Last week, we were in Kwara State. We had a town hall meeting in Kwara State where we had engaged different stakeholders, legislators from State House of Assembly, commissioners, government officials, CSOs, everyone. We try as much as possible to use that platform to educate people about the essence of women's participation in politics or in governance. And also we try to use that opportunity to advocate for the passage of the special seat bill. And we were also in Cross River, like some of my team members were in Cross River, where we had engagement with the same set of stakeholders as well. But while we were engaging these people, we had so many comments, so many comments that were made pertaining to the special seats bill. And one thing for me that I kept on telling people that the special seats bill is just like a step towards a big future for us when it comes to inclusion in governance in Nigeria, because for a very long time, when it comes to participation for women in governance in Nigeria. So I would like to thank the distinguished guests and the panelists and participants that has come to this webinar today in this discussion. And also our intention is to create a more inclusive landscape in Nigeria for women's participation. So a special thank you to the panelists and for sharing their expertise, their experiences, their actionable strategies that we will be taking notes, and the insights that you've been able to give that has inspired us to want to continue this work that we do at Stand to End Rape Initiative. And to all the participants who have been here engaging in this conversation and their contribution as well, I can say that we are true. Today's conversation is beyond this forum. I can bet it with you, it's beyond this forum. We're taking it beyond here. We are taking it to the high stakeholders to find a way to engage them as well, and this inclusion in governance is being passed into law. So thank you once again. And I would like to share a link because we're trying to sign a petition card where we're trying to take these petitions to the government to see of this bill section, and you see the links works for us. Please kindly help us sign that particular petition. And also, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the German embassy for funding our project, and also thank our official partner on this particular project, which is the Nigerian Women Trust Fund, and also Convest Africa for partnering with us to organize this webinar. So I will hand over to Dr. Ibin to give the final remarks, and we can call it a day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I really want to thank all the participants, and particularly Stand to End Rape. You have given us, Stand to End Rape has given us this opportunity to be part of history. We are making history. And we do that as well by also clicking on the link that Mr. Mohammed has posted, so that in the future we can tell our children that we're part of the movement that advocated for the rights of women or advocated for equity or equality. Con West Africa is delighted with our collaboration with Stand to End Rape, and we are looking forward to more events like this, more collaboration in different platforms, research outputs, programming at the grassroots levels, as well as high-level discussions. That is something that we're very passionate about in our West African Women Peace and Security Program. So thank you so much, participants. Thanks, Stand to End Rape, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend while you also reflect on how we can promote the rights of women and encourage women to participate in politics and high-level economic activities. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.